Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. In remembrance of Sultan. So this is going to be a time for an hour and a half to remember Sultan in many different ways. I'm going to kick things off here. Before I do, though, I do want to acknowledge that many from Sultan's family are here. Many of them came down from Maine, actually, and so yeah. Here on the island, and so very grateful for you to make the long trip down here. I hope you enjoyed this afternoon, and because we all really enjoyed Sultan over the years, and so and yeah, I'm going to kick it off, and then I'm going to pass it over to the dean, and then we're going to go back in time, thinking about the early days with Marv, and some of his first students. But yeah, I spoke a little bit earlier. Sultan to me was just an incredible mentor. When I joined Stony Brook, coming from Seattle, West Coast, my research was not on the East Coast. Nothing was East Coast for me. I was very green. Some of you, meanwhile, probably remember that. But Sultan was just an incredible mentor because he was a strong advocate of change. And in a university, that can be sometimes difficult to do, given the inertia and everything. So I came here with some dreams of having atmospheric science have more meteorology, weather, which is what I do, which was much different at the time. There was strong climate presence and chemistry presence and so forth. So I was kind of way down there with these ideas. But Sultan was just always there, his office always open, and he was open to these new ideas. And so when I was implementing or trying to get a new curriculum going for atmospheric science at the time, I mean, he was just the strongest advocate for that, and so forth. I mean, if it would have just been me by myself, it would have failed. There's no doubt about it. So he was always there. I had some nerve-wracking days. I'm sure it's going to come up many times this afternoon. He was just that calming presence where I just had this stressful assistant professor typical day, and he would just be in his office, and you would come in there, and you would leave the office just feeling much better, and so forth. And so his mentorship was, in the early years, and then he was actually director of ITPA, the Institute for Terrestrial and Planetary Atmospheres, for about 4 or 5 years, I think from about 2010 to 2014. And then he was starting to mentor me on more of his leadership skills. And that, I mean, Sultan's ability to lead people is somewhat different than others because he's, once again, that calming presence, and he's a listener. So he will listen to everyone's opinions. He has his own opinions, but he would listen. And I took that knowledge because I think listening is a very important skill if you want to be, a chair or a dean and so forth. You want to be able to listen. Sultan was just an incredible listener and able to take that information, work out compromise, which is another important skill. Sultan had just an amazing way of just bringing people together in like a faculty meeting type of arrangement. So he passed a lot of those skills on to me over the years, and so I'm very grateful to that. Another example on the education, just mentoring side, he always cared about the students. And in the early years, I mean, we've had this qualifying exam, for PhD, very stressful for students. Sultan was wanting a way to make that exam go better, because it was just, it was clearly a difficult exam, and he wanted the students to be more prepared. So that's actually what led to that reading class that Nicole mentioned. I mean, this is what Sultan brought up. He thought, let's have the students read some formal papers, even their first year, discuss them, get to know the faculty more, because he wanted to make sure they knew the faculty, and then give presentations, about those papers. So when they had to do that oral exam, it went so much better. In fact, I think, the pass rate for that exam was much higher after that whole enterprise, and so forth. So that was all Sultan's doing. So I have other things, but I want to make sure we have time for things. But Sultan just left an amazing impression on me. He was, a dear friend, colleague that I miss to this day. He would stop by my office, almost every morning, and we would discuss various things. He wanted to know what I was impressed. He was kind of a climate person, centers of action, but he wanted to understand extreme weather and understand what I do every day too. So that left an impression of me. Okay. We're just gonna be tag teaming through, and then we're gonna have time obviously for everyone else as well. But I want to introduce our dean, Dr. Paul Shepson, and so he's gonna say a few words.
Thank you. So, I'm a little bit older than Brian. I need to have notes, or I need to hold on to. Brian mentioned that to be a dean, you have to be a good listener. As you know, I'm not always a great listener, but I'll just point out that Brian is a really good listener.
Where I got it from.
Anyway, welcome to everyone, especially Sultan's family. Of course, we're shocked and not so happy about the reason that we're doing this now. I'm very sorry that we're celebrating.
Just a little closer to the mic.
Celebrating SoMAS' life and his impact on us at this time and in this way. But this is a room full of people who loved and admired Sultan and really appreciated him and who he was. So that all of us can use to make this a celebratory afternoon. So I'm just going to say a few words about my perspectives about Sultan and my all too brief experiences with him. But I know first that Sultan was really passionate about science, especially really good science. He cared about it. To him, it was like to many of us, a near religious experience, because scientists who study the earth are those who are trying to catch nature in the act of being itself. And Sultan is one of those hard physical scientists who really appreciated being able to describe processes with an equation. And if we can understand it well enough to write it down in mathematical form, then that's very satisfying. Sultan had really high expectations for himself, and I think, as Brian implied with our qualifying exam, he had really high expectations for our students, and they knew that, and that's a good thing, right? We should all have high expectations for ourselves. So I want to recognize Sultan's roughly 49-year career here in SoMAS, and the impacts are wide and deep. He helped determine what SoMAS became. He had played a key role in the development of the atmospheric science division, what it was and who it was, who we recruited. He impacted greatly. So Sultan reminds me that we are all connected in many ways, and often in many ways that we don't know about. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the ways in which Sultan and I were connected. So we both lived in Toronto, not quite at the same time, but we did get a chance to talk about that. We both started our careers in the process of studying tropospheric ozone and how it depends on NOx and NOx emissions. We both studied the fate of that nitrogen and in particular, nitrogen and precipitation. We both studied sources of methane to the atmosphere. He hosted one of my one-time close colleagues, Jae N. I don't know if anyone remembers Jae. She was here for several years, and he was passionately interested in climate change and associated atmosphere-ocean interaction. But it is a truth for me that almost all of those commonalities, common background, common interests, I learned about it after he passed. So one of the things I've learned from Sultan in this process is one of the things we should study carefully is our own colleagues. You know, he and I could have had lots of conversations on these subjects had I dug really deeply into his past and his contributions to the development of atmospheric science. So as dean, I had some occasion to interact with him, mostly in my office, and it feels like a formal place. I just want to comment on Sultan's demeanor. He, as you know, he was always very kind, quietly listening and thoughtful before he spoke. He was a gentleman, respectful in a way that I didn't need or want, and yet he was that way until you prove that you didn't deserve it. But even so, and that he was kind and humble and generous. So he was a lesson to all of us about thinking before we judge and being a thoughtful person. So I will finish by saying that personally, whenever I am when I have this kind of experience of loss, and in this case, a surprise, not a good surprise, but when this happens, we're reminded that it can happen. That all of a sudden you can lose people who are very important to you and precious to you, and we're reminded that life is fleeting and it's very precious. So one thing I want to make sure is that all of us never have the experience of feeling like I never got a chance to say to him what he meant to me, how important he was, how he inspired me. It's just really important to do that, to tell our friends and our family, our colleagues, the impact they've had on us, how they shape who we are. That's the case for Sultan. We should always take the time while they're here to tell our friends and family what they mean to us. We can tell them how much we appreciate them, that they have made our lives richer, that they really matter, and we love them. It's okay to tell your colleagues that you truly love them. So I'll finish by saying, I wish that I had said to Sultan, you, sir, are a truly good human being. He was.
So, Marv Geller, I left here about 10 years ago, retiring. But I thought, given my age, a little history would be in order. So I actually came to Stony Brook in 1989. And the charge was to sort of nurture the development of an atmospheric science research institute. And I was preceded already, there was a strong atmospheric science presence at Stony Brook. Mechanical engineering, Bob Sess. And I had just arrived in '89. Bob had been at Stony Brook since 1961. And Prasad Varanasi was in mechanical engineering. And he had been at Stony Brook since 1967. Sultan had been mechanical engineering since 1976. And then Jane Fox in 1984. And this was in the mechanical engineering department. Now, you'll notice I don't have Minghua on there because Minghua, when I arrived, was a postdoc actually working in Bob Sess's group. But Minghua, of course, was then and is now a very important part of the operation. By the way, just parenthetically, hearing Nicole and hearing Brian, I can't help but think they didn't see me as calming an individual as they found Sultan. I did notice that.
I didn't say that.
Okay. Yeah, I did notice that. Okay, and let's see, how do I do this? The space bar?
That should work, yeah.
No, space bar doesn't work. How about this?
Arrows.
Arrow?
As the first slide, you need to click on it to
You need to click on the side
make it start
on the keyboard.
responding.
The keyboard arrow.
Click on what?
On the screen.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay, and then in the physics department, there's Bob DeZafra, who again came to Stony Brook in 1961. And he was doing remote sensing in atmospheric science. And then there's another individual who left that year, but that was Toby Owen, who was in Earth and Space Science and did planetary atmospheres. And by the way, this is probably an example why do we have such an odd name of Institute of Terrestrial and Planetary Atmospheres? Apparently, Toby Owen and Joan Fox were investigating planetary atmospheres. And the other dirty little secret is there was an Institute of Atmospheric Sciences at Albany. And for political reasons, we couldn't have that similar name. So I, having been an administrator, but not having total respect for administration, I decided that I'd adapt a name where there'd be no trouble at all. So that's why we got the name ITPA. But so atmospheric science at Stony Brook was pretty strong, actually, before I arrived at Stony Brook. And but then we were supposed to pull it together, and that's what happened. So then the history is, I think it was 1992. We joined the MSRC at that point, Marine Science Research Center, because oddly enough, I in particular didn't have an academic home at that point. So I actually had an office in the physics department at that point in time. But certainly Sultan was one of the early contacts, and Sultan had many, many attributes. First of all, he's an excellent scientist. He was extremely well trained as a physicist. And he, how do I put this? Unlike many people who say they think like a physicist, he actually did think like a physicist. He had a good feeling for quantitative science and is very, very smart. No question. Another attribute of Sultan was perhaps just about more than anyone I knew, he was concerned about the welfare of students. You already heard Brian talk about his concern about the qualifying exam and starting that discussion group. But also Sultan, you know, in the faculty, you tend to fight over your best students. There's a lot of competition to get the best students. Sultan really looked after all students. He had a really concern for all students, and he was concerned of their welfare, and his nurturing of students, as you can see, and I'm sure you'll hear from Owen and others and Ken Sperger, it worked. He nurtured excellent scientists. He was a wonderful colleague. By that I mean, there are all these things that you need an atmosphere, you need any academic department to run. There are the glory positions and there's the nitty gritty things that have to get done in committees, things like that. Sultan would take on anything for the welfare of the department. I think he was unique in that sense because academics are not usually short of egos. And I'm sure Sultan had an ego, but he hid it very, very well, unlike many of us. Okay. He was a wonderful colleague. Sultan's science and my science were quite different, but I spent a lot of time in his office talking to him, sometimes about science, but more often about philosophy, world events, religion. He was just an interesting, thoughtful individual to be around. And I enjoyed my time speaking to him a great deal. We did speak about science, but main things I remember is he was a very thoughtful individual and also very thoughtful in a very humanistic sense, very much in a humanistic sense. I would, if I had to, in a short phrase, summarize Sultan, I'd say he was a true gentleman scientist. Scientists tend to have, as I say, significant egos. And they're sometimes competitive, students, funding, reputation, all kinds of things. Sultan was not into personal aggrandizement. He conducted himself as a true gentleman and an excellent scientist. And like many of you in this room, I prize the precious years I was privileged to interact with Sultan. And I think we'll all miss him in different ways. Certainly his family miss him a great deal. I think as individuals, we miss him a great deal. And the institution will miss him a great deal.
Thank you, Marv. So I think we're gonna keep thinking about the past here, and one of Sultan's earlier students, Ken, is going to come up.
Thank you to Brian and the SoMAS staff for inviting me to this memorial for Sultan and for asking me to say a few words about my experience as his graduate student. By sharing a few anecdotes, I hope to be able to give you a worthy impression of what it was like to be his student, as well as be part of an atmospheric science program buried within the mechanical engineering department. Before I start, I would like to extend my condolences to Sultan's family, friends, and colleagues on his passing. My heart especially goes out to his children, as I know they've had a tough few years with the passing of both their mom and dad. Sultan Hameed changed my life, and I will be forever grateful. I first met Sultan when I was an undergraduate. In about 1989, I took his air pollution control class, and it was immediate that he loved to teach. And I'm happy that through his final days, he continued teaching, which I know gave him great satisfaction. Given his remarkable career of nearly 50 years at Stony Brook, he positively affected the lives of thousands of students. As an undergraduate at Stony Brook, I completed a degree in Earth and Space Science with a concentration in astronomy. During this time, I was a teaching assistant for Professor Oliver Schaefer of the Earth and Space Science Department. Unfortunately, Professor Schaefer passed away unexpectedly, and my hope of possibly studying under him as a graduate at the graduate level was dashed. Subsequently, I took Sultan's undergraduate course on atmospheric physics, which transformed my life. The scope of this class brought me to the realization that there were a vast multitude of exciting problems to be solved in atmospheric science. At that time, Sultan recognized the potential in me that I had yet to realize. With his encouragement, I applied to Stony Brook for graduate school, and in 1983, I became his graduate student. Sultan was a gentleman who always concerned himself with the well-being of his students. While working on one of my first papers with Sultan, I discovered a coding error. Fortunately, it wasn't too egregious. I only had to change a couple of figures and the conclusions weren't affected. I was worried that Sultan might be upset at my faux pas, but rather than being upset, he dropped some wisdom on me by quoting from a book he had been reading. The quote is, "If I had not made my way as far as this mistake, I would not have been able to complete the whole of the journey." I've carried these words with me every day since. In the mid to late 1980s was an exciting time to be a graduate student in atmospheric science, especially given the large number and diversity of professional contacts that Sultan and Bob Sess had. Thanks to Sultan's contacts at Brookhaven, Gilbert Rayner and Janet Hayes, I was able to analyze a long hourly record of central Long Island precipitation that included concentrations of sulfates, nitrates, and ammonium. Using this data, we were able to estimate frequency distributions of wet scavenging coefficients for these species. Later in the early 1990s, we implemented a stochastic parameterization of these distributions into the global chemical transport model of Joyce Penner and John Walton, resulting in improved simulations of transport and wet deposition of these species. For me, the most exciting aspect of climate science was the ongoing development of climate models, including some of the first coupled ocean atmosphere models. Bob Sess had been working closely with Jerry Potter of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, who had been running the Oregon State University model as part of their radiative forcing studies. In 1985, Larry Gates, the lead developer of the OSU model, was looking for someone to analyze modes of variability in their ocean atmosphere simulation. Through Sultan, Bob, and Jerry, I was able to get 23 years of monthly output from the OSU coupled ocean atmosphere model, which formed the basis of my PhD dissertation. Using this model output, Sultan and I were the first to demonstrate Southern Oscillation El Nino-like behavior in a coupled model. In later work, after I graduated, we analyzed remote teleconnections to ENSO, including Indian monsoon, Sahel and Nordis rainfall, and we also evaluated surface currents and equatorial thermocline in the coupled model. Sultan and Bob were science team members of the US DOE People's Republic of China program on CO2-induced climate change that ran from 1986 to 1994. As part of that program, Drs. Chongyun Li and Zhang from the Institute of Atmospheric Physics, Chinese Academy of Science, became visiting scholars at the department. As a young graduate student, I was asked to help these guests get settled in. This is rewarding to me both culturally and scientifically. Afterward, Xinghan Liang and your own Minghua Zhang came to the department. During this time, Liang and I became friends as we both would burn the midnight oil in the computer room, him developing a new version of the IAP GCM and me working on my dissertation. In the early 1990s with Sultan and again in about 2000, we visited the Institute for Atmospheric Physics in Beijing, where we helped foster international research on monsoons. As I was about to graduate in 1989, the connections that Bob and Sultan had paid off once again. A few months before I graduated, Larry Gates moved from Oregon State University to Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory to start PCMDI, the Program for Climate Model Diagnosis and Intercomparison. They were searching for staff, and Jerry Potter reached out suggesting that I apply for a position at PCMDI. Luckily, they took a chance on me, and 1 month after graduation, I moved to Livermore, where I stayed for nearly 31 years. I never dreamed that post-graduation, I would spend the whole of my professional career at one institution. As with Stony Brook, the quality of the staff and the network of collaborations that ensued made for an exciting career. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Sue Rudnick, who unfortunately is unable to attend today's memorial. I spoke with her yesterday and she sends her condolences to Sultan's family. For those of you who don't know Sue, she was the admin for Sultan and Bob Sess, and she kept everything running smoothly. She made the lives of the graduate students so much easier. Day to day, she would look after us like a second mother and be an ear you could talk to when you're going through a rough patch or if you just wanted to shoot the bull. When Bob Sess poked his head out of his office, you knew it was time to cut the conversation and go back to work. In one notable event, Sue casually mentioned to Bob and Sultan that they hadn't given the teaching and research assistants a pay raise in quite a while. I can tell you, there were a lot of happy graduate students the next month. After our common research interests drifted apart in the mid-1990s, Sultan and I remained friends over the years by exchanging emails, phone calls, and visits. Since I have family on Long Island, where I grew up, I would come to Stony Brook often to visit with Sultan over the years, most recently in 2023. We would catch up on the research we were each performing, talk about family, have lunch, and take a walk around the campus. Over the course of 46 years, Sultan was my professor, advisor and mentor, colleague and friend. I owe Sultan a debt of gratitude, and I greatly miss him. Today, coincidentally, is my mother's birthday. She would have been 92. Unfortunately, she passed away in 1985 while I was in the midst of writing my master's thesis. Sultan and my dear friend Sue Redknapp both helped me through that difficult time. I hope that the outpouring of love and respect shown for Sultan here today will bring some solace to his family and an appreciation of how important he was to so many people. Thank you.
This gathering, it's great to be here. And this is Jae N, and Professor Hameed was my thesis advisor. So he trusted me when I was most untrustworthy. And we could meet and talk about many things nearly every day for more than 4 years. And the most important thing I remember is he's saying, sun shines to everyone, but only who's interested can see it. So if you are really would like to see it, you will get a Nobel Prize. So you will see it. But, yeah, this is not working.
I have to click on it. It's magically.
And throughout my career, I was fortunate to working on the sun from my PhD thesis. And I had an opportunity to design a cover page for a new journal and also NASA's total and spectral solar irradiance sensors. So I didn't do the graphics, but I could convey my ideas of sun and Earth. And you can see my perspective here that Earth is a sun-powered planet. So without the sun, Earth is just a flying rock in the universe, and you and I cannot be here today. So I'd like to say to you that you can have a moment to appreciate the sunshine you get today in honor of Professor Hameed. Sun is very important like this, but it's interesting that not many people are paying attention to the sun and solar variability. And we have too many things to take care. So often we think the sun is there, always there all the time. But this is a poster that I made, and I just put a few images from SDO, Solar Disk Observatory. And it's just a few images and also aligned with total solar irradiance, the energy that Earth we get from the sun. And I analyzed for only one rotational cycle. So it's that about less than 30 numbers. It's really simple. And if you are working on earth science and atmospheric science or ocean science, you know how many data you have to analyze to put together in a small work. But with this simple illustration, I could compete with 2,000 Goddard scientists, and I got the very honorable Pierre Sellers Award. So I'd like to show this to Professor Hameed that he would be very proud of it. And he may say, I told you so. So I'd like to say to you that if you're working on earth science, I suggest to you to consider more of the sun and solar variability, including diurnal cycle, seasonal cycle, and also hemispheric asymmetry, something like that. You can greatly improve your science. This is what Professor Hameed said. That's it. Thank you so much, and thank you all.
Thank you, Shaylee.
Hey,
Okay, Owen Doherty.
Hey, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today about the life of a person that I hold in such high esteem. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk about Professor Hameed today. Thanks to everyone who is organizing today's memorial. I know these things do not occur in a vacuum, and really appreciate that you've brought us all together today to remember someone so wonderful. Thank you very much to Professor Hameed's family for attending today. Sultan meant a great deal, as you've already heard, to many of us, and I'm personally deeply appreciative of the opportunity to share some of my experiences with him with you all today. And my sincere apologies for not being with you all in person. I wanted so much to be there and I'd planned on it, but I guess that was not meant to be this week. As Brian said, my name is Owen Doherty, and I had the great fortune of being mentored and educated by Sultan about 20 years ago as a graduate student. Sultan served as the chair of my dissertation committee. And although he was never technically my advisor, he also served as a voice of consistent, calm wisdom and advisement to me for my master's and PhD work. And I remain forever grateful to the lessons that he taught me along the way. Earlier this week, I had an experience that I thought I had outgrown and aged out of, and that would never happen again. I received a very difficult assignment from a Stony Brook professor. Brian asked me to speak for 5 minutes on some reflections on the time that I got to spend with Sultan, and I think this is impossible. I spent 7 years working with him and being part of his life in a small way, and 5 minutes feels very, very difficult. But upon reflection, this is of course extremely appropriate. As Brian and Marv already mentioned, Sultan was for many graduate students at ITPA the first person to oversee our public speaking and presentations and give us a time limit. So if today I managed to keep my comments to 5 minutes, that's because of Sultan's hard work in preparing graduate students to become competent speakers. I'm not saying good, I'm just saying competent. Brian shared the story earlier, and I was actually going to ask about how it was that Sultan came to be in charge of our Monday seminar series where students would come and present. I was wondering if that was something that Sultan chose for himself, or if other people saw in him the fact that he was so well suited to it and encouraged him to do it. But it sounds like that was his choice. Sultan conveyed an incredible sense of calm and gentle encouragement to all the students. Whether it was us presenting papers that the assembled faculty and graduate students would sit and listen to you, try to give overviews of, or presenting our formal research at the annual disaster symposium. Sultan was always in the front. He was patiently but firmly encouraging students to do their best in his incredibly kind way. Although Sultan was strict when it came to giving presentations and materials. For a 5-minute presentation, Sultan would insist on maybe 3, maybe 4 slides would be plenty for you. Although today I have fond memories of those times, and I really appreciate Sultan's guidance and help. I will try to honor his memory by restricting myself to 0 slides and hopefully no more than 5 minutes. When I was starting out as a graduate student researcher, I also had the privilege of working with Nicole Reamer, who gave today's symposium address. Nicole was just starting out as a new faculty member, and we were so lucky to get to work with Sultan, looking at how mineral dust varied with changes in Sultan's beloved centers of action. Nicole and I would have daily check-ins and periodically, very rarely, I guess I should say, I would come up with something kind of interesting, and Nicole would get a little twinkle in her eye, and she would say, "We have to go show Sultan right away." And so we would, excitedly march down the halls in Endeavor Hall and knock on Sultan's door, and there Sultan would give us a really warm greeting. He would welcome us. He would make it a point to stand up, walk to the door, formally invite us into his office, find us a chair at his table. Even me, a lowly, unimportant graduate student, would be given a chair and an opportunity to speak. And I think this was Sultan's way of making everyone that he worked with feel important and welcome into his life. Sultan did this with everybody, though. Sultan made people feel important and valued. Sultan was hosting or served as the lead of the seminar series, the weekly colloquium, and more often than not, he would serve as the host of the speaker. Sultan would, week in and without, deliver from his memory a robust introduction of the speaker, who they were, where they came from, their education background, their major career experiences. I think in retrospect, this was incredible. When I left and went to Scripps, this was not done. The speakers were kind of rushedly introduced and shunted onto the stage. And at the moment, I started to really appreciate how caring and thoughtful Sultan's approach was, welcoming nervous speakers in such a lovely way. I think is just so thoughtful, and it was academic, as Marv said. A gentleman scholar. It was warm. It was kind. It was very Sultan, making everyone feel important and welcome in his way. And I really appreciate that. And looking back, I think it was truly special. Just getting to go to Sultan's office was a treat in other ways too. I've heard multiple speakers talk about the joy in a casual conversation with Sultan, be it in his office or just saying hi. But Sultan's office conveyed an incredible sense of calm. Before the digital age, it was very common to walk into a professor's office and see stacks of printed manuscripts, each stack corresponding to an interest or a project they were working on, but not so much in Sultan's office. In Sultan's office, you got a clean table, a well-organized filing cabinet, a very nice calming rug in the center, and sometimes some warmth. I think to me, Sultan's office was always a sea of calm in an otherwise anxious and very active academic world. And I really appreciate that example he set for all of us, that it's possible to be successful and calm and live within your own pace. I think this was all part of Sultan's ability to portray an incredible confidence. He moved at his own pace. One could, if you were inclined, set your clocks to Sultan's constitutional walks through the trees or on the paths through campus. I never got the sense that Sultan felt like he had to rush or hurry or be concerned about how others were doing things. And I think in today's age of viral videos, clicks, focus on number of citations and short attention spans, Sultan's steady confidence and calm really stood out. And I remain inspired by it and deeply appreciative that he set that example for many of us. I think, as others have said, I owe an incredible debt to Sultan that I will never have the opportunity to repay. I can confidently say that I would not have earned my PhD without him and his gentle encouragement and support. He served as an unofficial mentor to me at a time where I really needed that guidance and encouragement more than I knew. I think Brian's introduction really spoke to me that he naturally gravitated towards providing wisdom and serving as a mentor to those around him. Sultan sent me to my first major conference. After the second paper that we published together, he felt our results needed to be seen. So we didn't have a grant. I don't know where he found the money, but somehow he the kindness of his own heart, he sent me to San Francisco to AGU, which of course is a wonderful but completely overwhelming experience. The first time you go, meeting tens of thousands of people doing the same work you do is inspiring, exciting, and terrifying all in one. And when I got back, Sultan asked me, how did it go? And I said, well, here's how the poster went. Here's what people had to say. He said, well, how did it go for you though? And I said, it was completely overwhelming, Sultan. And he just kind of smiled and nodded. And I think he really understood that feeling of starting out your career and how hard it can be to launch yourself. And as others have said, his care for students and his thoughtfulness and his understanding of that experience really shone through. It has been discussed that the qualifying exam changed under Sultan's tenure. I am the beneficiary of those changes, so I can tell a little story from the other side of the fence here. But I definitely failed the qualifying exam the first time I took it, and was not confident that I could ever show my face again in the building. And of course, Sultan thought that was ridiculous. I can't remember if it was Brian or Minghua who kind of pulled me aside and said, "You have to do it again. You can't give up, and you need to do it this time." And I didn't understand why they wanted me to go, right away the next semester and do it, but I did it. And I walked in the room, and of course, Sultan was the first face that I saw on the committee, and he just offered me a calm, reassuring smile, and that took away a great deal of my anxiety. Although I have no memory of it, I've completely dissociated from that experience. I somehow got through it, in no small part thanks to Sultan. Just after that, my advisor Nicole, she got a great offer to move to Illinois, which was fantastic for her and abjectly terrifying to me as a PhD student when your advisor lets you know that they're leaving the university. But Sultan remained a steady presence who clearly believed in me, and it was so wonderful and reassuring to know that even though Nicole was not physically there anymore, Sultan was, and he was always in my corner. And I know that's a role he played for many other people than me, that steady presence of support. Sultan was an incredible practitioner of empathy. I think before people in society talked about the importance of empathy, Sultan was an example of how to do that. I've shared some personal examples of Sultan's steady calm and approach to science and life, and the warmth and encouragement he showed to me and others. But it's my understanding this was not limited to his academic community at Stony Brook, but to all the communities in which Sultan participated. And I'm going to get some of the details wrong because this story is secondhand. So Sultan's family, please forgive me or correct me as I tell this. But I was talking about Sultan, I'm sure in an admiring way, to my roommates while I was a graduate student, and one of them piped up and said, "Oh, Sultan, maybe I know him." She said, "Sultan is the president or the leader of the Interfaith Council that operates in my hometown, and his mosque and my synagogue share a space, and he serves as sort of the leader of the dialogue between those two groups." And this was just, of course, right after 9/11, which I can imagine was a very difficult period in time to be a person of the Muslim faith in America. And of course, Sultan would not, shy away from that challenge. I'm sure he stepped up and represented his community in a way that led to tolerance and understanding between people. And this is a secondhand story, and I hope I've gotten it right. But I will say that, knowing him professionally, this is very consistent from the way that he behaved and welcomed people from different places into his lab group and into our little community at ITPA. In closing, it's been 20 years since I met Sultan, and now I find myself in his shoes to some small degree. Today, I'm very lucky to be able to mentor some young scientists myself. And there are three values of his that I really try to replicate when I work with young people and encourage them. The first is I see the good in everyone, and I encourage my mentees and supervisees that, particularly in a digital age when sometimes all the words we see from someone are typed, to assume positive intent. When I left Stony Brook and began as a postdoc at Scripps, I was asked to review a manuscript, and I started reviewing it, and I said, "Wow, this is awful familiar." And I realized that the words within the manuscript were mine, and that someone had kind of copied them and pasted them into a new manuscript. And this was someone Sultan knew, and so I called Sultan or emailed him, I don't remember which, and said, "Well, I'm upset. This is a terrible thing that's happened." And of course, Sultan didn't see it that way. Sultan immediately said learning a second or third language is incredibly hard, particularly for people to try to do in a scientific communication style in a language that's not their own. And this person has probably just seen these words and thought that they could not improve upon them. And it's a great compliment to you and to us that they've thought that the words could not be improved. And I was disarmed immediately. Of course, my anger went away. I felt foolish for having been angry. But that was Sultan's way. He just saw the good in everybody and assumed positive intent. And I really appreciate that and try to emulate it when I can. Other people have talked about Sultan's humility and lack of ego. I never found Sultan to be a boastful man in any way. He was reserved, and when I would ask him about his past and his career, he would answer in a way that made his accomplishments seem not all that important, even though, as others have described, they were. I always got the sense that he was pleased when we would get a paper accepted that we worked together on. But to Sultan, it was more the natural outcome of doing science the right way was getting your publication, not an achievement in and of itself or something to be chased. That said, the only time that I ever saw Sultan showing pride or acting even marginally boastful was when he would discuss his family and his children. In the quiet moments at a potluck, Sultan would maybe relax a little and share a little of himself, and he was always incredibly proud of his children's accomplishments, their educations, who they were becoming as people. And I just wanted Sultan's family to know that was something that was clear for those of us who were lucky enough to get to know him. So to Dr. Hameed's family, Sultan was a great man. He's missed by many, including myself and many beyond those who could be here today. By my very quick accounting, he's missed by people at least 4 continents. Thank you so much for sharing him with us. I feel very lucky to have gotten to know him and appreciative of the opportunity to share my memories of him with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Owen. We have a couple more past students, one of which I'm going to read, but Nicholas Leonardo, do you want to come up? I don't think you have a presentation, but I'm just moving things around.
I'm going to be honest, I actually only learned about this the other day. I didn't get the email that we're going to have a memorial event, but so pardon me if I'm a little scattered, and I mean, because there's so much to say with my experience with Professor Hameed. But first, I just want to again thank the organizers of this memorial event, and also again my condolences to his family and friends. But yeah, so Professor Hameed, he, without needless to say, was the gentlest, most understanding, and most patient professor that I've had the pleasure of knowing, which was perfect for someone like me, who was entering this field very intimidated and perhaps not having a full understanding of what being a true scientist was about, what being a researcher or a scholar was about. And to that effect, he was very wise, that he always had personal wisdom to bestow upon me, and also was able to guide me to the right people, to the right doors, to learn what I needed to know and basically get my feet wet. Before I entered this program, I didn't know what an NetCDF file was, and how to process it. But he guided me to the right people, and from there I managed to learn, and so yeah, he and also to that effect, he taught me about I think I was mentioned before about public speaking. And how to be self-confident. That was another thing. He was always bestowing upon me, someone who doesn't have much in the way of self-esteem, about positive thinking. And I every now and then, when I'm feeling very upset or really down about myself, I just remember some of the books he recommended to me and some of the anecdotes that he told me about how to stay positive, how to not let those intrusive thoughts control you. And in addition to that, he was also, okay, by the way, he was my master, he was the advisor of my master thesis, which was in 2011. how time flies. But yeah, he also was the first co-author I published a manuscript with under Monthly Weather Review. And he gave me an idea of what the review process was like, not to take any of the reviewer comments too personally, however scathing they may be. And yeah, that's. And that goes back to his patience and wisdom, how he was, very, very calm and very understanding and knew exactly what to say in response and how to and what I needed to do in order to address the issue. But otherwise, yeah, it's because of him I managed to get this far in life, that I managed to at least become a little more confident, certainly when it comes to public speaking. And I'm eternally indebted to him for that. And that's sorry, that's all I could think of right now. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I have one more here. Wei Shi, unfortunately, he couldn't make it. He was actually supposed to be here in person. But he just sent me some text yesterday and so forth. So I just wanted to he got his PhD under Sultan. Not sure what year, but he's currently working at NOAA, the Climate Prediction Center. As you can see, he serves as chief editor for Climate Diagnostics Bulletin and so forth. So he sent me some words. I'm just gonna put them on here. I can read them as well. I first met Dr. Hameed in the summer of 1992 and soon became one of his students. That marked the beginning of a very important chapter in my life, and I will always be grateful for the role Sultan played. He was much more than an academic advisor. He was truly a father figure to me. Sultan was intelligent, extremely kind, a handsome gentleman. Even one of his former students cheated on him. I never saw him show any sign of anger, though I could tell he was deeply hurt. Instead, he asked me if he himself had done anything wrong to that student. As my advisor, he constantly encouraged me to broaden my knowledge in all fields of atmospheric science by reading journal papers and attending seminars as much as possible. He also cared deeply about my personal life. When my son was born, he postponed our regular meeting time so I could catch up on sleep. Another time, I developed a small bump on my chin, resembled a tumor, and he invited two of his friends who were tumor specialists to give me a thorough examination. Sultan, I feel incredibly lucky to have you in my life. You will always be deeply missed. So that was from Wei Shi. So thank you, Wei. Okay. Now we have some time for you guys, and I already have Kamazima who wants to come up, and then hopefully others will as well.
Right.
Yeah.
What's wrong? That's one mistake here. One mistake. That's mistake here.
Oh, that's to read online. Okay, I'll do that next. Yeah. Oh, after Kamazima. We'll do Kamazima first.
Okay.
Hello, my condolences to the family. I'm Kamazima Lwiza. I'm not an atmospheric scientist. I'm an ocean physicist. And you might be wondering why. Yeah, we happen to be in the same building, same school, but Sultan was more than that. And most probably to almost everybody in the school. But I'm gonna give you my examples in my personal life, how he affected me, until to the very last. Sultan was, as everybody has said, a gentleman. He defined what being a gentleman should be. But there was one thing though, whenever I went to his office, Sultan was, he would kind of flutter around, make sure that you're really comfortable. if you did that, when it came to my office and I'll do that, he said, no, don't say Sultan, but you do that to me. He said, you don't have to worry. So that I couldn't quite adjust to kind of why he did that. But the other thing that defined Sultan was kindness. And what he said, yes, it's if you help because you've been asked, you're a nice person, right? If you don't help, you're a bum. But Sultan did not wait to be asked. Sultan helped without being asked. He would see something and he would come to you and try to offer his intellect. Most of us others are just trying to kick you away so that they can look bigger. But he was the opposite. He would pull himself down to your level and expect, well, and I'm talking about my case. There's no way I could be like Sultan. So in the interest of time, let me fast forward until May this year. He had been teaching one of my PhD students, and Reza, he took his statistics course and did very well. He was excited what he has done. And he came and asked me, he said, Kamazima, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm trying to predict dissolved oxygen in Long Island Sound. So that's interesting. Have you ever thought about trying to do return period? I said, people are not gonna care about that. You know? He went back. 2 days later, he came back with my paper. I wrote like 208. Said, Kamazima, you wrote a paper on extreme value theory here. What? This could be very useful for Long Island Sound. I said, nah, it can't be. He said, yeah. So we sat down and he started deriving equation and they said, you can use this and we can change things. And I said, okay. I said, we called Reza and talked about it. And then the following day, he came back having changed the approach. And I said, Sultan, that's not gonna work. He said, to work. I said, no, you're doing it for the maximum. It will work. He said, just take the reciprocal to work. And so Reza and the Sultan argued and I lost the argument. So we agreed, we started working on it. And then Sultan, it was like a Thursday, and he said, I'm gonna come to talk to you on Friday. So he came on Friday, but he seemed to be in a rush. And I said, he said, I got to go to Boston. And I said, what are you going to do in Boston? So my granddaughter is graduating. But he was so buoyant and, you know, more than usual, so excited, almost like a kid's excitement. And I kind of thought, well, that's grandfather being proud of it. I just want to relay this. I'm sure they know that. But he was so proud, so happy to go. But what I didn't know, that was the last time I was seeing Sultan. I didn't see him again. Next time I heard he was dead, which was a shock to me. So, but then that kind of kicked my butt. I decided that work is gonna have to be a paper. And so we worked on the paper because it was sidetracking us. That was part of my resistance. I was thinking, that's not where I'm going. I want to do machine learning, and this has got very little machine learning in it. And so we did it. And when we were writing a paper, that reciprocal thing came to haunt us again. And we couldn't quite explain some of the things. And I told her, I said, you and Sultan. So I said, I'm going to read and find out. But I think I used Sultan's weapon against the two, Sultan and my student, and went and read everything I could find on the GV. And I couldn't quite find most of the things I'm looking for the extreme function on the right, the maximum values, but not the minimum. And then I thought, instead of the 1 over, why not negative? If you put a negative value, it will flip the thing and it will be looking on the other way. And I told Reza, I said, no. Professor Hameed said, I said, try it. And they tried, it worked. I said, you didn't follow your professor's teaching. So the long story short, this paper will be submitting it actually next week to Nature. We went beyond that because my student, not me, he managed to go beyond the return period, and it is defining, we're trying to categorize how you get these dissolved oxygen state in estuaries. And so it's defining a framework, which is something in my career I've never picked up. And so I'll end up saying, I'm not good at, as you can gather, I'm not as eloquent as other people who have been here, but I want to borrow, I'm not a poet, and I can't write a single poem, but I can steal poems from the internet, right? So I'm gonna go to Henry Scott Horner, which you remember, I used to think that was a poem actually, but it's not a poem. He wrote it as a sermon, and it's been taken as a song. I'm gonna read the first verse and the last verse. Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I've only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. All is well. Nothing is hurt. Nothing is lost. On one brief moment, and all will be just as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again. Thank you.
I'm sorry about you. Anybody leave the phone in together? Hey.
So we'll keep it going. Mariko, you stood up for a second. Did you have something to share? You don't mind coming up to the front, I guess. Well, I don't know about that.
Connecting will be.
Yeah, that may take a little time. Just three. Yeah, if you don't mind, and yeah, you're the. So by the way, we haven't been using it, but it's. You want to hold this, it would.
Hi, I'm Mariko Oue. I'm pleased to introduce some message from Minghua Zhang from Minghua University. Thank you, Professor Hameed. When I first came to the US, I was shy and scared. My English was not good. Professor Hameed saw me. He told me to be brave. He encouraged me to join the society. It's gone. Sorry. Sorry.
That's a firewall.
You have to put your PIN number to be alive.
Okay, let me read from the beginning. Sorry. Thank you, Professor Hameed. When I first came to the US, I was shy and scared. My English was not good. Professor Hameed saw me. He told me to be brave. He encouraged me to join the society. He even gave me my English name, Elizabeth. That's the name. And his kindness gave me confidence. Thank you for believing in me. From Minghua Zhang from Minghua University. That's it. I didn't have many chance to talk to Professor Hameed directly, but I was feeling comfortable and encouraged with his smiley face and calm talking. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Minghua, well done.
So I will be brief. I came to Stony Brook as a visiting scientist. At that time, my entire English-speaking experience consisted of talking to maybe 7 people, including my English teacher. So Sultan at that time organized the seminar for the graduate students, just like several of people mentioned for the benefit of the students, but apparently it's more than that. I benefited greatly because it gave me the first chance to actually hear from English-speaking colleagues and then to see whether I was speaking really English. I was not really sure. And then 1 semester later, Sultan came to my office with an unexpected request. He said, we have an undergraduate meteorological major. We don't have a person to teach dynamic meteorology. We think you can do it. And I was really kind of shocked that I had never taken a course in the English speaking country. Not to mention taught one. And I said directly, I said my English was terrible. How could I do it? He said, no, you spoke quite clearly. You said participated in the seminar and you could do that. So I did not know what questions to ask, so I did not ask any questions. And just accepted. Of course, nobody asked any questions about how that course went. That was before Marvin came to Stony Brook. Otherwise, we won't be able to get away with that. And so, thinking back, I'm really grateful for the confidence Sultan had in me. At that time, I had very little. And then providing the welcoming environment, like Ken, like Susan Rudnick, to people like me who came from China after, say, graduate school straight. And so Sultan was really a big part of them, just like a family. Over the years, when I have since in doubt, I could go to Sultan's office, as many of you said, he would always listen, understand, and then offer his wisdom and advice with calm, kindness. We really appreciate what Sultan did. We miss him. His spirit and influence live on us forever, and we are really fortunate to have worked with him. Thank you.
One more time, yeah, Edmund.
Yeah,
I think a lot of you have already spoken a lot about what Sultan is really one of the sort of most kind and gentleman scientists that I've ever met. And I just want to highlight that even towards the end of his career here, he's still working hard to try to improve the program. One example is that he really spearheaded the implementation of the climate science major. He actually led the committee that I and Kate was on, and actually spearheaded the proposal as well as the approval process, and we finally have the climate science program officially started. Undergraduate program officially started in January this year. And I know that last year he's still actually mentoring high school students to do research. So even though, he's always not just work with graduate students, undergraduates, and also high school students, and try to introduce science to a broad community. So so I think a lot of the other things that people have already mentioned, so I'm not going to repeat them. Just want to show my appreciation to what he actually continued to strive for during the last years. Thank you.
Malcolm?
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody, this wonderful occasion, and you've all said the kindness and the wisdom of Sultan lives on. He was almost like a high priest, someone you could go to in times of trouble and confusion, and he would give you very wise, calm advice. Following the attack on the Twin Towers in September 2001, and all the tumult and chaos that caused, I went to Sultan. I said, look, Sultan, I'm quite active in local affairs, and I have a group who would like you to come and talk about what it's like to be a Muslim living in Stony Brook. And he looked at me very thoughtfully and he said, Malcolm, I'm being watched. He said, Malcolm, I'm being watched. And I knew what he was saying because there were rumors going around the faculty senate that there were undercover, let's call them spies, from the CIA and the New York police. I know this is true because in the late 80s, I arranged for a visit of a huge Soviet research ship to the port of New York, and that was followed by an invitation to go to the Soviet Union as a guest of the Academy of Sciences. And when I came back, you know, the CIA found out about this and they were harassing me. They wanted to come out here to my office. And I kept saying, no, you can't come to my office. But anyway, so there was a real presence. And so it was very interesting that Sultan, and the final thing is a happy story about a common love of the sport called cricket. Now, those of us who come from the remnants of the British Empire will know what cricket is. And if you compare baseball to cricket, there are similarities and there are differences. Baseball is two-dimensional. You have a square diamond. In cricket, it's one-dimensional. You have a pitch. In baseball, you have a pitcher. In cricket, you have a bowler. In baseball, the batsman, if he hits the home run, throws away the bat and runs around. In cricket, you carry the bat with you. So Sultan introduced me to there was a channel on TV, and your family will know what I'm talking about. And he introduced me to this paid channel
of cricket, the source of cricket. So that's something we shared. And the last thing is across the hallway is now the Professor Emeritus office. That was Sultan's old office. So every day, Bob Wilson and I, when we go in there, we think of Sultan. So thank you, Sultan.
Good afternoon, Professor Hameed's family, friends, colleagues, and students. My name is Pin, and I have been a colleague and a friend of Sultan for 16 years. I would like to share 3 short memories of him. First, when I first taught ATM 346, a mathematically rich and very challenging class, I struggled. My first couple of lectures were honestly bad. Sultan noticed that, and he immediately offered help by inviting Professor Emeritus Marvin Geller here to join me and guiding me on how to teach the material more clearly. He often reminded me that our goal is to help students grow. That simple idea stayed with me. Because of that, in the years that followed, whether in our co-taught wet lab course or in my own ATM 346 and Python courses, my teaching consistently improved and has been evaluated well above the university average. This change started with him. Second, Sultan cared about my progress. When he heard that my first NOAA grant proposal was funded, he was even more excited than I was. More recently, he was so thrilled about my $500,000 NOAA grant and encouraged me to do it well, to fulfill our commitment to NOAA and to the community. His constant support and encouragement meant a lot to me. Third, Sultan put a great thought into the ATM 320 data analysis with Python project. He designed it so each student could choose a weather station from all over the world they're interested in, download historical data, and analyze it to connect local trends with global warming. This project became the core of the class. Now, there will be 40 in the coming semester, this semester 26, always 6 on the waiting list. It helped the students better understand climate change, not only in the ATM sector or ATM major, but also in other majors across the school and the university. Many students told me it was their favorite part of the course. In summary, Sultan devoted himself to the growth of young faculty, to the ATM division, to SoMAS, and to the university. His impact lives on in our teaching, in our students, and in all of us. We will miss you, Sultan.
Seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, eh? So that's together.
Homecoming season.
Yeah, so I'm Yannick Rigg. I was a student here about 15 years ago. I remember vividly like the first, so my journey into SoMAS was a little bit different. Professor Knopf was my advisor. So undergrad, I studied chemistry at Stony Brook. I took his atmospheric science class. I did pretty well, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to be like a summer student?" It's like, "Sure, why not?" Did that.
did pretty well. Like I enjoyed it. He's like, hey, do you want to be like a grad student? I was like, yeah, why not? You know? And so, took the GREs, like applied, did everything like formally. But I started in like January, as opposed to September. So I remember the class that everybody was talking about where, you read these research papers and you have to present. And to me, it was like, I got chosen like very early on, like first week or second week. And this paper was just like, I'm a chemistry major. So like, show me chemical reactions, like, feel good. This was like meteorology and climate models. I'm like, I'm lost, like this is like another language to me. And Sultan, being the great guy he is, I guess, he knew this is like way out of my realm. He actually like gave me a couple resources. He was like, this will help you out to understand like what's going on here. And yeah, sure enough, like it really helped. I was able to present, but that was him. You know what I mean? Like really cared about people. Just offered like, hey, this will help you out. Just sort of knowing I was just lost in the sauce. And yeah, he was just a great guy. Like even just coming back to this room, like it's been a long time. I remember Hameed would always sit like over there, like that was like his spot. You know what I mean? Like religiously, like it was, just brings back such great memories of him. And so yeah, he was a man among men. I only have great memories of him, and hope that he's resting in paradise. So thank you.
Final call. Okay. Go a little minute back.
Right, yeah. So first of all, I want to say my condolences to the Hameed family, and that I'm really grateful that I had a chance to be with the Sultan here. And actually, how I first met him was in my interview for assistant professorship, 2006. And at that time, it was quite tough. It was 2 days, 8 to 12 hours or so. It was really brutal. Half an hour each. And I came into Sultan's office, and everyone said this calmness. Or I'm like, ooh. And like, okay, all right. Of course, you're nervous. Do your job. You see what people study, and how you can collaborate. And Sultan suddenly starts talking about a paper we recently published before, and it was completely out of his league, something with ice phase in the atmosphere. I didn't expect that. He was so curious, and he studied so well for interviewing me and had so many questions. And he did it in a gentle and kind way. It was really impressive. I mean, I came very humble out of this office, and I said, oh yeah, I think this is a good place. I hope I make it. I got really nervous afterwards. And then, of course, a year later, I was here, faculty, and you heard in the symposium about our famous dinner with a wonderful Hameed family, where Nicole and I and our spouses were invited. And that left also an impression. He heard that Sultan always cared about students, but he also cared about young faculty. And I try to carry that too and try to help young faculty. But Sultan really very elegantly led the way with his kindness, inviting us. And so I never worked directly on a project with Sultan, but his door was always open. I could come in and we talked philosophical questions. I struggled at the end of my assistant professorship and then associate professorship, how, in quotes, the business of science is conducted. Things changed a bit, and we talked a lot about these things. And as people say, you come in anxious, stressed, and you come out like, okay, everything's good. And that was wonderful. Also, what I still I'm striving for, where Sultan really was a role model is, yeah, as people say, he was never really angry or upset, never raised a voice. He's so kind and sees the positive in people. Sometimes I knew, oh, this must upset him or he's not happy. And he would just iterate his point gently, or he would talk maybe a tick faster. And you felt, yeah, okay, so this is an important point. And every time I'm in my office and I'm almost half exploding, I think like, okay, think about Sultan, how would he have dealt with that? Or see the positive, don't take it personal, find a compromise. And that is what really stayed with me of him. In that sense, it was a really great mentor, although he didn't really personally worked on research. He was a mentor in a greater dimension than science too. And so I dearly miss it.
So yeah, I think we're gonna wrap this part up. It's been amazingly touching to hear all these stories and how Sultan has left a lasting impact on all of us. His legacy will live on here for all of us. And so my condolences again to the family. I hope you got some appreciation just how special of a man Sultan was and how he impacted so many people over the years in a positive way. So we are so grateful. Yes.
Maybe one of them would want to say something.
I did not give them any warning. But Jeff, do you want to come up? So Jeff, Stanton's son, come on. That's a good idea.
I've absolutely nothing prepared. I did not know this was gonna happen, but we'll give it a shot and see what happens.
Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. So first of all, thank you everyone for coming here today. It is greatly appreciated. I made the trip from Maine with my wife and my family because we knew how important these type of events were to Dad. He spoke of these types of gatherings, these get-togethers, and this was his extended family. Ken Sperger, of course, he knows I'm going to mention this. Dad took me to Lawrence Livermore Labs, may have been 91. I might have been 12 or 13 years old at the time. Ken was kind enough to take us out into Muir Woods. He was kind enough to take us sightseeing, and he took such good care of us as if he was another part of the extended family. I've seen so many of these faces before. You've probably seen me as a little kid running around. We've just been sitting here soaking it all in. I appreciate everyone's thoughts. I appreciate everyone's sentiment. Everyone here is taking something away from Dad. And I think that's the message of positivity, the message of change, and it's the message of being the best person that you possibly can be. So with that, thank you everyone for this amazing afternoon. I've been teary-eyed the entire time. It's such a great place to be and a time to be here. We've had a few months since he passed to really get past the grief, and now we can really look to celebrate his life. And this is such a great, great moment in time for me. So thank you all. We appreciate it all. And thank you to Brian and Dean Shepson. We've been in contact with them. My older sister is here, of course. We've been in contact with them since the day after he passed. Brian and Dean Shepson have been absolutely amazing. I have nothing but gratitude for everyone. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming down. Thank you to the whole family. Thank you to everyone. We're not done yet. We have cake in the back and other goodies and some coffee and soda. So please stick around to mingle with the family and others. So, and thank you so much for coming though. It's been great. And thank you all online for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Owen and everyone.